Okay, I've muted everyone, and I want to welcome you. Um, Welcome you to the Humanities and the Future of Journalism in Rural Alabama workshop. I am Laura Anderson, and I serve as Special Projects Coordinator for the Alabama Humanities Foundation. I want each of you to know, especially now that we've had an extra challenge with technology, how proud we are that you have registered for this and that you're going to spend time thinking with us about the role of journalism in a democracy and about the history and, more importantly, the future of journalism in Alabama over the next 3 days. This workshop is funded by a grant from the Federation of State Humanities Councils, and it's part of an initiative between all of the state humanities councils nationwide. We call it Democracy and the Informed Citizen. Um, there's a hashtag for it too. I know, Bob Grip, that some of y'all are active on social media, and you can use that hashtag, hashtag HumCitizen, capital HUM, capital C, HumCitizen. We really do invite those of you who use social media that way to share thoughts about your experience here and about the relationship between journalism and democracy in your community on social media. And that way our fellow humanities councils across the country can hear Alabama voices in the greater mix of things. Before my little introduction continues, I want to bring our Alabama Humanities Foundation, still kind of new executive director, Dr. Lynn Clark, in to bring greetings to all of us.
So I think I'm unmuted. Can everybody hear me? Great. So thank you so much, Laura, and thank you all for navigating all of the barriers that technology just gives us to get here today. Thank you. I know that Laura sent you all Richard Louve's blog that was posted at the California Humanities. And I just wanted to quote him about the connection between journalism and the humanities, that the humanities requires us to step into the shoes of people from other times and cultures, people who don't look like us, people with starkly different points of view. And just say that now more than ever, we need to walk alongside those who, as he said, deserve a dignified hearing. We need to acknowledge our own biases, and we seek to understand the multiple perspectives that those various shoes bring to us. And in doing so, I think we can together go beyond reporting problems to finding possible solutions. So I wanted to thank you for allowing us to walk beside you for the next few days and welcome you to the Alabama Humanities Foundation.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Again, thanks to each of you for committing to participate, as Lynn said, this week. I mean, today, tomorrow, and Friday. And also for your thoughtful responses to the questions that we posed when you registered. If you'll recall, we asked two questions aside from gauging your commitment. We asked, one, what stories need to be told in your community? And two, how do you think journalism relates to democracy? Without going through all the answers, which would have been really fun to do, even before we got a delayed start, we didn't have time for it though. I want to share that several of you, quite a few of you, almost all of you, responded that stories of Black Alabamians need to be told in your communities. Several of you, quite a few of you also responded that stories related to the economics of life in your community need to be told. Stories of how people make a living and how our state's natural resources are used to that end. Those were quite common responses, but at the same time, there's just a rich array of answers. Two of you who are on I hope you're on this, I didn't check to be sure, but two of you responded in a way that I wanted everybody to know really gave me pause. Two of you stated that stories that need to be told in your community are human births, partnerships, and deaths. Life, really, if you want to think of it that way. And that, from what I've been reading and listening to about the state of journalism in America, which is often referred to lately as being in crisis, may end up being the saving grace of some papers, or more importantly, the thing that compels the birth or the rebirth of journalism in some of our communities. In other words, the value to people in any community of having life itself recorded, births, milestones that we all want to share, personal partnerships, economic partnerships, and yes, death is considerable. And it's the chronicling of the experience of being human that matters to many people in a fundamental way. So I want to thank the two people who pointed that out and kind of grounded me as we prepared for this workshop. So I want to get started. We have a great lineup of presenters over the 3 days to help us explore connections between the humanities, journalism, and democracy. And I want to see where we end up going. That's in some part up to y'all. If you noted at the outset, if you were on at the beginning, I pointed out we have more registrants than we had yesterday. It may be that we decide to go to a webinar format for all or part of the remainder, but for today we're good. We're all here in this meeting space together, and we'll see what happens. I want to say one more time, this workshop is made possible by the Democracy and the Informed Citizen Initiative, administered by the Federation of State Humanities Councils, but we thank the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation for generous support of the initiative, and also the Pulitzer Prizes for their partnership. So it's my pleasure now to turn things over to Nan Fairley, our lead scholar for the workshop. She's with the Auburn University School of Communication and Journalism. Nan, you got to unmute yourself, I think. You got it? Okay. Thank you. Hello.
Good morning. How's everyone here? I'm really excited that we're all here together. Thank you for coming to the workshop. And even though we thought we would be together in person, and we're going to make the most of our time together. I think I really want us to try to make this time together an opportunity to consider why journalism in places both large and small matters, and perhaps even more today than ever before. We hope that you are inspired to learn more about journalism and take that inspiration home and tell your own stories, engage others in conversation, and recognize that stories matter. I think that was a great way to start our conversation today, thinking about stories and life and death and everything that happens in between. I started my own career in community journalism and worked in Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi. I love journalism now. I'm a lot older, but I've been teaching journalism for almost 3 decades at Auburn, and I love it now as much as I did when I was a teenager and working in community journalism. As some of you know, I could probably go on and on about why I love journalism and why I think it matters so much to all of us, but I won't, because we have a Zoom room full of journalists and students and civic leaders and just great people here today. And we need to hear from them. So I won't take up too much time. I believe that we can use this gathering as an opportunity to make connections, and certainly hope that you consider thinking about the role of journalism in your community as we move ahead. I also want to think about the role of journalism in democracy, where we have, which is even more important today than ever before. You can see today that journalists still feel the role of being the watchdog of the government, which is one of the reasons why they were included in the First Amendment. You can also see on social media posts, as they go viral and videos are shared, movements being built. So communication and how it creates change is certainly something that we continue to see today. I think more importantly, maybe you can see how important journalism is when you look at the loyal subscribers who depend on community newspapers still for the information they can't find anywhere else. The editors and reporters in Alabama communities cover meetings, beauty pageants, elections, and so much more. Sometimes the stories are about Little League victories and high school graduations, and sometimes those stories are cut out and put up on the refrigerator so they have lasting value. Sometimes the stories that you find in community newspapers question authority. They shake up local politics. They shine a light on community issues that leads to positive change. Sometimes those kinds of stories that really cover local news are the kind of stories that our founding fathers really envisioned when they put freedom of the press in the First Amendment. Knowing, as the Washington Post motto now states, that democracy dies in the darkness. Looking ahead, or looking back basically, towns in the early history of Alabama, in the early years of statehood, sometimes had a population of less than 2,000 people, maybe 200, 500 people. But within those early communities, they would have 2 or 3 newspapers competing with each other. And I think that's fascinating to think about today as more and more newspapers do disappear. Today, we often talk about the lack of internet access in rural areas, but we don't really talk about the fact that many of the newspapers that have worked and served citizens in those communities are disappearing as well. As they disappear, and hopefully they don't, but and they continue to do wonderful work, we are losing diversity of voices and access to information created in that community. And even though we're drowning in a swamp of information and vapid social media posts, we still need legitimate, concrete information to make effective decisions as citizens. Today, I really think it's important that we think about, we always hear about food deserts, but there's also a news desert. And communities, these are communities with limited access to credible and comprehensive news. So this is especially concerning in rural parts of America, where we've lost so many papers. More than 500 of the 1,800 papers that have closed or merged since 2004 were in rural communities, leaving a great information gap. Even though the majority of newspapers in America are community newspapers that serve a smaller circulation still, we need to think about what happens in this information gap. And does it really matter? We all have our phones in our hands. We can get any news we want anytime. But studies show that a strong local newspaper improves civic life and participation in elections. So that means that if your town has a newspaper, you have a stronger life, you know, a stronger community, perhaps. At least that's what the Pew Research Center has found in their studies. So, you know, that's the important thing to me to think about as we move ahead. And also, good journalism, again, keeps citizens informed, holds public officials accountable, and educates local citizens about important issues. So if we don't have it, who's doing that work? Jerry Brown, who was the former head of the Auburn Journalism Department and is now the retired dean of the School of Journalism at the University of Montana, said it better than I can when he wrote in an introduction to a community journalism textbook. A community without a newspaper is like a church without a pulpit or an altar. Something is missing, a familiar voice, a sense of home, a continuity. The character of a place is defined and confirmed by its newspaper. And these country cousins in the great family of the Democratic press are just as essential to our way of life as their more citified cousins. So I think Laura did a great job presenting the questions that we can continue to think about while we're together. What stories are not being told in your community? What meetings are not being covered? Who is working together to solve problems? How are the local citizens getting the information they need to be informed and make good decisions? And probably more important for this and for ongoing conversations that we hope result is, what can we do about it? These missing voices, these information deserts. So again, I thank you so much for being here, and I will turn it back to Laura, and thank you for being here.
Thanks. You're going to have to do that lots of times this week. I was saying I'm still trying to get Wanda Lloyd with us. So while we're waiting on that, I think what I would love to do is have a shout out kind of thing. I was going to go through and just do almost a roll call. It's the only way I know to do this with this many registrants, and let folks just wave or say hello and tell us where they're from. I think I know where everybody's from, but is Kristen Bronner on?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, Kristen, thanks. What about Gabrielle from your staff?
Yes, Gabrielle, Justin, and Haley are all on.
Oh, good morning, y'all. Thanks. Yeah, I saw Justin added himself. That's great. And Sean, I pointed out earlier, Sean, you were our first registrant down, you're in Chatham, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Hi.
Thank you so much for your persistence in getting here. What about Brant? I think you said you want to go by Brant, right? Brantley Cook? I think he's on.
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Hey, thank
Yeah.
you. And where are you, Brant?
I'm in Sims, Alabama.
Sims. Okay, is that Mobile County?
Yes, ma'am, about 20 minutes northwest.
Right. Okay, thanks. Alexandria McKinnell, I think you go by Lex or Lexi.
Yeah, that's me.
Okay, where are you, Lexi?
I am in Mobile, Alabama, right next to the University of South Alabama campus.
Great, thank you. The Howards are on, I hope. Mary and Freddie. Are y'all on? We got to get them on here. They are in Beatrice, Alabama. And I need to make sure they get on here. Making a note about that. What about Thomas Chapman? I think I saw you.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, and where are you, Thomas?
I'm from Saraland.
Saraland, that's right. That's
Yeah.
Mobile County as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. And Kathy Cook, I know you were very helpful earlier getting the information out.
Yeah, and I'm here, and I'm with the University of South Alabama, so I would be in Mobile, except that I am with my spouse and son up in Connecticut because I have a strange commuting situation. Not strange, it's a fairly common one, but I'm a semi-commuter, and I'm in New Haven, Connecticut, but ordinarily I live in Mobile, Alabama.
Okay, wow, glad to have you. Thank you, Kathy. And Bob Grip, we pointed you out a couple of times and thanked you for helping publicize this. Hello. You're still muted too, Bob. You're doing a Laura. You're good.
Oh,
There you
all
go.
right. I'm in Mobile, and I recommend this study after listening to Laura, The Expanding News Desert. I used to teach at Spring Hill College, so I always bring handouts.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Bob. Did Gary Burton get on? I know you were having trouble, Gary, in Pentlala. He may not be on yet. I don't think I admitted him yet. He will be with us. What about Ramona Hyman in Huntsville? I don't see her listed yet. Regina in Codin, is that how you pronounce it? We'll get her on later. Shanika Smith in Tuskegee. Not on yet. Okay. I know Pam Horn is on here.
Hi, Laura. Hello, everyone.
Where are you calling from, Pam
I am
Horn?
in my office in Randolph County at Southern Union State Community College, and so I am bi-communitarian. I'm part of this community, but I'm also from Clay County. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Pamela. So you're in Wadley?
Yes.
Okay. Marianne Martin is in Montgomery, I believe.
Yes, but I have a special interest in Lowndes County, which influences the Black Belt.
Right. Thank you, Marianne. Did Terry make it on from Hartselle? I'm seeing my list and not seeing Terry from Hartsville. I know Katie Jackson was on here. And I think Katie is in Auburn.
Yes, I am. And I just figured out the unmute button. So yes, I'm in Auburn. I'm the fly on the virtual wallpaper here. I'm just listening in as a
Okay. Ruby from Theodore, did you make it on?
Yes, ma'am. I'm here.
Oh, great. Thank you, Ruby. And thanks for your call this morning.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
now, yeah, thank you. And now we have one of our speakers coming up on the line. So that's great. But we'll continue this. I don't know if Ms. Huff is on from Lower Peachtree. If so, I think she's on the phone. We have some professors from Auburn University Montgomery with us. Hillary, Matthew, and David. I see you.
Hi.
Professor Okoa.
Hi.
Hi, thank you. Roger Thorne didn't make it on, but he writes for the Blount Countian, and he hopes to be with us tomorrow. Is Samantha Gomez here from Pine Hill? Not yet? Okay. I know Alicia Chavrist is here.
Yes, I'm here from Huntsville, Alabama.
Thank you so much for being here. You have a nice background there. Kendall Aldridge in Huntsville. There you are.
Hi, I'm here.
Hi, thank you. A recent college graduate. And Jessica Connolly.
Hi.
Oh, there you are. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, I'm in Auburn.
Yes. Okay. And then we have Harrison Carter. I think you're an Auburn student.
I'm here. I'm in Auburn.
Okay. Thanks, Harrison. And Georgia Ellard from Birmingham is on. She's not doing the video, I think, but I see her here. And then we had some registrants overnight that I hope made it on. Kendra's in Birmingham, and then we had Rebecca from Auburn.
Hi.
Hi. Amy from
Hey.
Columbus, Georgia. Yeah, there you are, Amy. Thank you. Diane Harris is on the phone with us, and she's from Packers Bend, or that part of the world, Monroe County. Shannon from Mobile.
Hi, yes, this is Shannon Shelley Tremblay. I'm part of the team, and I'm having trouble, so I'm on my phone. But getting on the Zoom on the normal way, so I'll keep my video off. But it's great to be with everybody, and I'm on the team with Dr. Cook and Ruby and Lex and Brant, and we're part of the Gina Connor Snyder team at the University of South Alabama this summer. So we're really happy to be here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And Lauren Cochran from Troy. She just registered this morning, so she might not have joined us. And the good thing is that all these folks can join us tomorrow, I hope, because we did have a little technical issue on our end, and there are some issues on other ends as well. So with that done, I thank you again. That was fun. And we're really excited to have all of you. Ah, Terry's in the waiting room. I guess we could all say hey to Terry and freak her out if we all just said hey. Hello, Terry. Welcome, Terry. We have done introductions, but we need to move on. I would like to ask Melanie Boyer, who is Director of Programs for Alabama Humanities Foundation, to do us a little favor. Hey, Melanie.
Hey.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
She is going to do something fun, I hope. Pull a name out of our special door prize box. And let me tell you, the door prize is a copy of Wanda Smalls Lloyd's memoir, Coming Full Circle. And Wanda just got on here. So I'm relieved about that. And I can tell you this is a great read. So Melanie, will you do us the favor of pulling a name out of the box?
I will. Let's see. Jessica Conley.
Ah, Jessica, congratulations.
Oh, cool. Thank
Jessica
you.
Auburn, you are going to really enjoy this book, and I'll be in touch with you about, I bet Wanda Lloyd would even sign it for us. Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you so
we'll
much.
move on to the next part of our program. Wanda, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you just fine. What is Jessica's last name?
Connolly.
Connally.
Ellly. I'll send it to you.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Congratulations, Jessica.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Wanda, I'm trying to make you big on the screen. Forgive our issues early. I'm so glad you made it on because the show can't go on without you.
No problem. I'm here.
There you are. I don't even, when I do this spotlight video, is that making her visible to everybody bigger? Yeah, that's what I thought it did, but I'm learning as I go. You all have been really gracious this week, by the way, in the phone conversations that we were able to have. As I said, we're gonna make this what we need it to be together, not just this workshop, but this entire Democracy and the Informed Citizen project. So, all right, Wanda, nothing like not having any time to see everybody's faces before you're on, but I want to welcome Wanda Lloyd. All right. Wanda Smalls Lloyd is a retired newspaper editor and also a leader in journalism education. And for both of those reasons, we have invited her to be with us today. When she was executive editor of the Montgomery Advertiser, she was the first African-American responsible for the news content of that daily newspaper. And then before that, she was a senior editor at USA Today for a good bit of time. She was managing editor at the Greenville, South Carolina News. She has also worked at the Washington Post, at the Miami Herald, the Providence Evening Bulletin, the Atlanta Journal. She's a Spelman graduate. So she's worked a lot of places. And most recently, she was associate professor and chair of journalism and mass communications at Savannah State University in Savannah, Georgia. And she is coming to us today from her home there, which is also her birthplace. As I mentioned, you will really enjoy her memoir when you read it, and I hope that you all will do that. You get to learn a lot about Savannah and Spelman and Wanda's career. She has been a 4-time juror for the Pulitzer Prize. She co-edited a book called The Edge of Change, Women in the 21st Century Press. And she served on journalism advisory boards at Virginia Commonwealth University, Alabama State University, Auburn University, and Savannah State. So last summer, the National Association of Black Journalists inducted Wanda Lloyd into its Hall of Fame. And I bet that was a wonderful occasion. So I'll stop going on about you, Wanda, and ask that you speak to us, please. And thank you. Sorry for our problems this morning. We're so glad to have you with us.
Great. Well, thank you and good morning, everyone. It's good to be here. I feel like I'm back in Alabama. I was there for 9 years as executive editor at the Advertiser, as she mentioned. I just want to first applaud all of you who are taking this 3-day workshop, and I hope all of you get to partake all 3 days or as much as possible. It sounds like a really wonderful program. I was just looking over the agenda. I am really anxious to answer some journalism questions, but I also wanted to just talk about why I wrote Coming Full Circle from Jim Crow to Journalism. Laura mentioned that I was chair of the department here at Savannah State University. And as I was having meetings with seniors every year as they were about to exit their the college, the university, they would ask me questions about my career because they knew I had not been in the academy for a very long time, that I had spent most of my career in newsrooms. And there were lots of questions about, well, why, you know, where did you come from? What did you do before? And so I started explaining to them that I actually grew up in Savannah. I left and I was gone for, I don't know, 42, 43 years, but I came back when I started working at Savannah State. And I talked about my journalism career. And then they asked me, when they asked me where I grew up, they asked me what it was like to grow up in Savannah. And I started talking about the Jim Crow era. And many of them had no knowledge of what Jim Crow was all about. It's almost like they studied slavery in school, and then they studied they just kind of skipped over the whole Jim Crow era. They almost went straight to the Civil Rights movement, and they skipped over Jim Crow. And so I realized that there were, and they started asking me, well, when will you write some of your stories? And I realized that there was a lot of interest in journalism in my career, but also how I got there, especially the Jim Crow, and juxtaposing someone who, imagine, grew up in the Jim Crow era where we were told where we could go, where we couldn't go, where we went to school, how we went to school, using books that were hand-me-downs, shopping on Saturday and being restricted about what we could do in the stores, you know, things like not handing the change in our hand or not being able to try on hats in the stores, going through the civil rights period in Savannah. Even though I was very young, I was not one of the people who was going through it, but I was with my parents who would go to the Sunday mass meetings every week, and we would learn how to do, you know, nonviolent protests and things like that. So that's what this book is about. The journals, it's almost like 3 books, you know. It's the Jim Crow part, there's the journalism part, and I did work at 7 daily newspapers, always as an editor. I've never been a full-time reporter at a newspaper. I worked in newsrooms for 42 years. So there's the journalism part, you know, the leadership part was very, very, I spent a lot of time on leadership in this book because I think it's very important to inspire young journalists to become leaders. And I tell people, you can be a leader when you're in college, you can be a leader when you're young, and then of course you can be a leader not only in your community, and in your career, but you know, just in your neighborhood association, your places of worship, wherever you are, you can be a leader. So there's a large component of that also. And then the last part is diversity, because I was an advocate for diversity in journalism. And we put together some programs to help not only staff newsrooms with more diversity, but also the content of our news products. And I hope we get to talk about that a little bit today. I think you have a couple of questions for me, Laura, but that I think because of the things that are going on right now, with all the conversations and the protests and the attention that's being paid to racism and this sort of anti-racism movement that we're seeing, I really think, you know, people have a lot of questions about, well, how do I make sure I cover my whole community? How do I make sure I'm inclusive in my coverage? How do I find people who can help me be inclusive, whether it's staff people or just people in my community who can advise me. So I'll stop right there and let you get into your questions. I can't hear you, Laura.
I appreciate it, and I really don't want to stop you from talking, but you made me so proud a couple weeks ago when you said you loved my questions. I was like, yes. So I will ask the first one.
Okay.
Being situated in a humanities council and being an admirer of all the humanities disciplines, I had asked if you could reflect on what made you decide, it's kind of leaping ahead in your book, but what made you decide to major in English when you got to Spelman, and how did that inform your career?
Okay. Well, you know, when the decision was made for me to go to Spelman, I really did not have a choice, because Spelman did not, and still today does not, have a journalism program. Spelman is a family school. I'm the third generation in my family, women in my family who went to Spelman. My grandmother and my grandmother's sister went to Spelman at the turn of the 20th century when it was called Spelman Normal School. My Aunt Catherine, who raised me, graduated from Spelman in 1936, and she actually went to Spelman from second grade through college. So, you know, long family tradition of Spelman College. I actually wanted to go to the University of Georgia. I wanted to follow Charlene Hunter, who was the first African-American to go to University of Georgia, because she was majoring in journalism, and I knew from the 11th grade that I wanted to be a journalist. But my family did not, you know, back in the day, we used to do what our parents told us to do. And they told me, no, you're not going to go to the University of Georgia because we don't want you to go somewhere and be a martyr. There was, you know, there's still a lot of, it was not an easy thing to do in 1967 when I was about to go to college. And so I did go to Spelman because they just told me that's where I was going to go. And it was a very good decision. But I majored in English because I knew I wanted to write. And I ended up not being a writer full time, but I was always a good writer. I loved to read. I was always very curious. And so I actually got my training in journalism at Clark College, which is now Clark Atlanta University, which is directly across the street from Spelman. I was registering for classes in my sophomore year, and you know, back in the day, we would stand in a gymnasium all day and get in lines and register for our classes because there were no computers. And I heard someone sort of behind me and over my shoulder say something like Clark College and journalism. And what they were talking about was there was a single journalism class being offered. I got out of line, walked across the street, went to Clark, registered for that, got in line at Clark. We could register at any of the schools in the Atlanta University Center. We could not major in their courses, but we could get academic credit as electives. And so I registered for the very first news writing class at Clark College. And then as time went on, they built that program. And so I ended up getting probably enough credits to major in it, but English was my major because I was at Spelman. So that's kind of how the decision was made to not major in journalism. I found a way into journalism despite not having a major.
How did being an English major, though, inform your work when you started doing it? I can imagine, I know I almost majored in English and I had to take advanced grammar, and I thought of that when I was reading your book.
Yeah. Well, you know, the advanced grammar class that I took, I loved.
Yeah, you would.
I just love words. I mean, how it informed me, of course, was just doing a lot of reading and research, for one thing, you know, writing a lot of papers and asking a lot of questions and talking to a lot of people. Those are the skills we use in journalism. The writing style is different, of course, and that was, I guess, a challenge somewhat early on. I mean, it was even a challenge recently because I know AP style very well, and I know how to find it in the style book if there's something I don't know. And then all of a sudden I had to learn Chicago style for the book. So being flexible enough in the style of writing English papers and doing the kinds of things, the kind of reading I did, and then turning around and doing journalism at the same time, you know, it just gave me some skills that have stayed with me all the way through writing this book.
I bet. I had also wondered if you could talk a little about Alabama, practicing journalism here, and the change that you saw over time when you were here. Everyone on the call today is living and working in Alabama.
Sure. Well, I came to Alabama from Tennessee, actually. I was working for 5 years before I came to Montgomery, not in a newsroom, but at Vanderbilt University. I was the founding executive director and started a program at Vanderbilt funded by the Freedom Forum called the Freedom Forum Diversity Institute. And it was a program to identify and train people, second career people who were looking to change from whatever they were doing before to journalism, to daily newspapers specifically at that time. And we would bring them to Vanderbilt's campus, and these were adults. These were not, college students. These were people who had had other careers. Some of them were professors, accountants, manufacturing people. We had one attorney who was looking to change careers. Her dad wasn't too happy about that after all that money for law school, but that was her life. And so we trained them in an intensive 12-week program, 6 days a week, and then we sent them back to their local community and they worked with the newspaper. These were all people of color. The purpose of it was to have a great impact on diversity in the newspaper business. So when I was leaving Tennessee, and I actually put this in the book, the CEO of the Freedom Forum said to me, Wanda, going to Montgomery as executive editor of the Montgomery Advertiser is also almost like being the governor, because it was such a high profile newspaper at the time. And because it was in the capital city, and because however we shaped our coverage and however we addressed the needs of the community, people paid attention to that. And so I learned that. The other advice I got when I left Tennessee and was coming to Montgomery is that Alabama is a big football state. I am not a football fan. I am not a sports fan, but I had to learn really quickly that from the little kids all the way up to, of course, the universities was a big, big deal. And so I would say the first thing that I felt, I realized that we had championship teams the entire time I was there. Alabama and Auburn, y'all ran me, you just ran me all over the place, because we found that we had to do these instant sections, because every time there was a championship game, SEC championship, and also I don't even know what you call it inside the regional championship. We did instant sections. We also did those instant books. And so I was working all night. Every time they would have these big, when the Iron Bowl happened, I was in the newsroom all night. And it was very important. And I learned so much about football, but I also learned about the culture of Alabama, the competitiveness. So that's one thing. I was there for on the day that Rosa Parks passed away. That's another story that I have in my book. I actually took the day off. It was in December, early December, and I took the day off because I was trying to burn some vacation time before the end of the year. And so I said, well, I just take a day off. And I literally spent the whole day cleaning my closet. And at about 8 o'clock, I was standing in my closet and the phone rang and somebody said Rosa Parks had just passed. And I just put on my shoes and yelled behind me that my husband was probably watching something on TV and said, Rosa Parks just passed by. And he knows me well enough, and we had been married long enough to know that when a story like that breaks at night, he was not going to see me at all that night, because we were going to go in and prepare a special section that was almost prepared, but we had to, of course, update her obituary, which was already written, with the date and the cause of death and some minor details, and then do a reaction story. But we put together, and I believe it was an 8-page section that night, overnight. And remember, we heard about it at 8 o'clock. By the time readers got it the next morning, got their paper the next morning, that section was in the newspaper. I had the opportunity and the overwhelming opportunity to be a speaker at the Dexter Avenue King Memorial Church. soon after I got to Montgomery, I got there in 2004, and I think September of 2004, I was asked to speak, and it was for what they call Women's Leadership Day. And I arrived at the church that day, and they took me downstairs to the pastor's study, and they seated me there and told me that that was the place where Martin Luther King had written his sermons. That was his desk. It's still in use. And then when it was time to go upstairs to the sanctuary, I had attended that church a few times, had been invited. And, you know, it really was not well attended at that time, because like a lot of churches downtown, people have moved away and they don't come back to that church. So I didn't expect a large crowd. Oh my God, when I got there, the church was packed. People were standing around on three sides. It was standing room only. And so I had prepared a speech, but I realized that they really came to hear me talk about me, not about women's leadership. And so after I started reading the speech, I just closed it and I told them I'm just going to speak from my heart, because I knew they wanted to know a little bit about it. And I talked about my past. I talked about my passion for diversity. I talked about why I was enjoying living in Montgomery, because it's a place very similar to Savannah, very similar in size, similar in demographic makeup, a little bit similar in weather. Savannah is a little more tropical. So I was really enjoying, and I was enjoying meeting so many people there. So that was a little bit emotional, because I was able to speak from the podium where Martin Luther King had spoken. And then the last thing I'll talk about is we did a series on domestic abuse. One day we had a very short story in the newspaper. A reporter, our crime reporter, wrote a story about a woman who was killed by her husband. She was kind of a newlywed. She'd been married a couple of months. And it was her second marriage. She was I think she was in her 50s. She had children from her first marriage. And she was killed by her new husband. She married in December. He killed her, I think, in February. And just like a lot of stories in that way, we didn't have a lot of details. But I got a phone call from the woman who ran the Family Sunshine Center, which is a shelter and a place that women can go for abuse services. And the director of the center called me and said, "Ms. Lloyd, this woman was not on our radar. We didn't know that she was having issues with abuse. And we just wonder how many other people in the community are having the same thing, and they don't know that we have services. We have a place where they can go, a place of refuge. They can bring their children. They can get services for health care. They can get job training, you know, just to make them comfortable leaving the situation that they're in." And she said, "I wonder what you can do in the newspaper to help us get the word out." And so we talked for a little while, and we came up with a plan to do a roundtable of all the media in the community, bring in everybody. We brought in the news directors from every TV station in the area. We brought in the head of cable, a couple of cable companies, billboard companies, public relations firms, and we also brought in the district attorney, the police chief, the mayor came, other centers that had resources for people with abuse. And at that roundtable, day-long roundtable, we served lunch and stayed all day. We came up with a plan to do a 1 week in the month of October, which is Domestic Abuse Month, to do 1 week of conversations and stories about domestic abuse. The cable companies ran ads on their stations so that people could get the name and the number and the information about where to go for help. We ran stories we really planned it for 7 days, but we had so much content, we expanded it by 1 day after we were about halfway in. All the television stations ran pieces about domestic abuse. And after we ran our very first story on Sunday, the same woman called me back. Karen Sellers is her name, for those of you who know her. And she said, "I just want you to note that our calls increased by 26%, I think she said, overnight." So it really did. We really felt like we were having an impact in the community. And for those of you who are planning to become journalists or planning to launch journalism projects in your communities, That's really what it's all about. What kind of impact can you have? You know, we always covered the breaking news. We always covered the crime stories and the stories about, you know, concerts happening in the community and all the routine things that newspapers and news organizations, and now a lot of digital organizations, will always do. But where's the impact? Think about that as you are preparing your news product. How can you have an impact in the community beyond the everyday news?
Thank you, Wanda. Because of our technical issues, we really are going to cut it shorter than we had planned. I know I had asked you to think about this big idea question about journalism and democracy, and I'm sure you did think about it. We will allow some time. I'm so glad that you and Philip Rawls were colleagues in Montgomery at the same time. I'm going to turn it over to Nan and let her introduce Phil. But during the Q&A, maybe we will get to that bigger question about the relationship between democracy and people who tell stories. But thank you so much. Let me make sure. I think I saw Phil was able to join us by video.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, good. I'm going to find you in my lineup and we'll go to you, Phil. Thank you again, Wanda. And thank you for staying on and everything. Let's see. Well, Nan, you can introduce him while I'm trying to find him. Thank you.
Well, we have a dream team here today with Wanda and Phil, that's for sure. I'm really honored to introduce Philip Rawls today because everyone in the state recognizes him as one of our state's greatest journalists. He started his career in community journalism at the Atmore Advance and then moved to the Montgomery Advertiser, where he worked for 4 years before he joined the Associated Press. And then he spent 35 and a half years covering countless meetings and as he wrote about government and politics in Alabama. During his reporting career, he covered every Alabama governor from George Wallace to Robert Bentley. He wrote about everything from tornadoes to college football to what some might consider boring legislative hearings, but were important for us to know about. And I really had the privilege of getting to know him during the past 5 years because after he retired from the AP in 2013, he came to Auburn to help us teach the next generation of journalists. And I really never met a student who he did not have a really great influence and as he shared his love of journalism with them. So we will miss him going forward, but I know that he is going to continue to tell stories even though he's retired again. So I'll just turn it over to him, but I really appreciate him being here.
Thank you, Nan. There you are, Phil.
Yeah. Nan had asked me to mention how I got interested in journalism, and an alley is responsible for me going into journalism. My dad was one of the owners of a Napa auto parts store in Andalusia when I was in school. And this was back in the 60s when most stores were not air conditioned. So on hot days, he would leave the loading dock door in the back of the store open to create a breeze through the store. And I would go to his store some afternoons after school and sit in the back and do my homework and stuff and then ride home with him when the store closed. The same alley was shared by the weekly newspaper in Andalusia, small town with a once a week newspaper. They would leave their loading dock door open. And so on Wednesday afternoons when they would be printing that week's edition of the paper, I would wander up the alley, stand in the alley and look at their printing press run. It just fascinated me seeing that paper going through the printing press. And I got to know the editor of the paper, Ed Danley, and he let me write for the paper when I was in high school. I would write about stuff going on at the high school, what was planned for homecoming and that kind of stuff. And so I decided to be a journalism major, and I'm one of those folks who went to college and never changed my major and never changed what I wanted to do for a career, and did it for 41 years in journalism and then 5 years teaching journalism, and wouldn't change it for anything. I was also asked to mention to you what Associated Press is. Most folks see Associated Press stories all the time, but don't really understand what a news cooperative is. Y'all are familiar with the AP Top 25 football poll in the fall. Alabamians follow it all the time. That is a small part of what AP does. AP has reporters, news reporters and sports reporters in every state and in more than 100 countries around the world. It covers news all over the world for newspapers, TV stations, radio stations, online news sites, and a story that I would write in Alabama could just go to news organizations in Alabama. It could go to news organizations across the South. It could go to all 50 states, or it could go worldwide, depending on what it was. So AP is a little, is different than your typical newspaper or TV station. And Nan had asked me to share some stories about the impact that journalism can have, particularly in small towns and rural areas. You're going to hear, I think, tomorrow about solutions journalism. And too often reporters write about the problems in their town and don't write enough about the people trying to solve those problems. So there was a period in Alabama when there was a huge backlog of foster children needing adoption. People want to adopt babies, but at that time they didn't want to adopt a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old child. And it was particularly bad for African-American children in the foster care program. A lot of difficulty getting adopted. So I happened to meet this couple from a small town in East Alabama, not far from Auburn, that had adopted 5 foster children from the same, they all had the same mother, different fathers. The mother was addicted to drugs, could not seem to kick them, and all 5 of her children had been taken into foster care, all girls. And this family was such a great story. They were not a wealthy family. The wife was an LPN at a hospital. The husband was a factory worker. They had raised 4 boys and become empty nesters. No girls in the family. They decided to take in one of the younger of the 5 sisters as a foster child. They were like typical foster family. They wanted a younger child. Then they took in a second one, then a third one, then a 4th one, and then a 5th one. And then they decided they wanted to adopt them all, and they did. And from checking with the State Department of Human Resources, I found out this was the largest sibling adoption ever done out of the foster care program. Normally, if you had a family of 5 kids, they got split up between 2 or 3 or 4 foster homes. Most people are not brave enough to adopt 5 children at once. And so anyway, I went and visited this family. I went to school with the girls, and and they were just a great family. They were talking about, they were used to raising boys. They didn't know anything about girls. They were empty nesters. They were at that happy point in your life when you're just supposed to be, fancy free. Your kids are grown. You're waiting to have grandchildren. Instead, they take in 5 girls. They mentioned to me in the course of the story that after their 4 boys were grown, they downsized their cars. They went to from family-sized sedans to compact cars. So when they went with the 5 girls anywhere, they had to take both cars because they couldn't all fit in one car. Anyway, I did the story. It ran on a holiday weekend, ran all over the country on AP. It just great, brave family, far braver than I would ever be. And it touched people. The first business day after the story ran, I started getting calls from people who wanted to send them something. I wanted to just write them a note of encouragement or a note of thanks. And so I told people how to get in touch with them. And that afternoon, I got a call from the adoptive mom. And she said, did you get a call from an elderly lady in the Carolinas? And I said, yes, I did. She asked how to get in touch with y'all, and I gave her your phone number. And the adopted mom said, well, she called. She read the part of the story about us having to take 2 cars to McDonald's or the movies or wherever. And she said that she was adopted as a child. Her adoptive parents gave her a great family. She was now in her 80s. And as a way of saying thank you to her parents who were long deceased, she wanted to buy this family a van so they could all travel together. And she did. So when you write a story about someone doing something brave and courageous that touches someone so much that they open their pocketbook to buy a van, you've done a good day's work. But what was even more important is after that story ran, people started calling the State Department of Human Resources asking about maybe becoming foster parents and taking care of a child who needed a home. And it increased interest in that program. And so solutions journalism can be that simple. You write about people who are doing important things. There's an old saying in journalism that everybody has a story to tell. You just have to find it as a reporter. When I was at that more advanced, fresh out of college, didn't know what I was doing. I always tried to write about ordinary people in the community. Most of us are ordinary people in the community. We identify with other ordinary people. And there was this woman, elderly woman, lived alone, very modest house that I would drive by occasionally, and she had beautiful flowers in her yard. And so I thought, I'm just going to stop and do a story on her flowers in her yard. What a showcase it was. And I contacted her and I went over to her house, and in the course of telling someone in town that I was going to do a story on this woman for the next week's paper, they told me, they said, well, she'll offer to give you some of her flowers. She does it with everybody who compliments on her flowers. She'll say, oh, I've got some of that rooted in the backyard. Let me go give you a cutting of that to take home and put in your flower bed. And so I went and interviewed her, and sure enough, when I got ready to leave, I had complimented her daylilies, and she said, oh, those daylilies need dividing. Let me go get a shovel and give you some of those daylilies to plant. And I said, well, ma'am, I live in an apartment. I don't have anywhere to put them. And she said, well, take them to your mother. And I did, and I took them to my mother, and they wound up in my mother's room. But I got more comments on this ordinary lady. She was nobody in the scheme of things. She didn't hold any appointed office, any elected office. She didn't own a business. She was just an average, ordinary citizen. But everybody told me, oh, I've got such and such in my yard that she gave me. And it just caused an outpouring of comments writing about an ordinary person who had a great story to tell. When you're writing about it in your community, and Wanda said this, focus on the impact of something. I saw a story recently in a local paper that was the worst journalism. The local school board was proposing a property tax increase for schools. And the story quoted the school superintendent about why they needed a property tax increase. And it said how much the property tax increase would be in mills. Property tax are levied in mills. No homeowners understand millage rates. Tell them, you do the math for them. Tell them, if it's a 10 mil increase, how much would that affect a house valued at $100,000? How much would it affect a house valued at $200,000 or $300,000? Do the math for them. And then this story didn't interview any parents of students. It didn't interview any students. It didn't interview any homeowners, what they thought about this. It totally missed the mark. Tell people how government proposals or decisions impact them, and then talk to the people who would be impacted by this. If you don't tell people how the news impacts them, they're going to lose interest in your local news organization, and not subscribe to it, not read it. And I think that is why so many news organizations are in trouble now. They forget to write about impact and they forget to write about ordinary people. I'll give you one quick example. When I was covering the legislature one day, the Alabama Senate was about to give final passage to a boating safety bill. And the bill did a lot of things, including raising the age at which children had to wear life jackets in a boat. And it got really tough on drunken boating. There used to be an attitude in Alabama and a lot of other states where, you can't drive drunk in a car, but if you want to drink, 6-pack of beer and then get behind the wheel of a boat, that was okay. Well, this brought the drunken driving level for boats in line with the drunken driving level for cars. Anyway, I could have done a story listing all the provisions of the bill and the fact that the legislature passed it and the governor said he was going to sign it. But I thought, I've got to talk to some real people. So I went up to the Senate gallery where the public sits, and I looked for, it was crowded with people who were there on a lot of different bills that day, but I looked for somebody who was kind of leaning forward in their seats, paying close attention. And I saw this couple up there. And so I went and tapped on their shoulders and said, introduced myself, and asked them if they were here on the bill, and they said they were. And I asked if I could talk to them after the vote. And so they said, sure. And they came out in the hallway outside the gallery, Senate gallery. And I said, well, what brought y'all here today? And they said, our 2 daughters were killed by a drunken boater who rammed our boat on a lake in North Alabama. And I said, tell me what happened. Well, they started describing it. They started crying. I got tears in my eyes. And I built a story around them and their tragedy. And included in their story, I included the provisions in this bill and how it toughened the drunken driving law. And instead of being a story that AP just used in Alabama, the story went nationwide and it touched people's hearts, and other states began to look at getting tougher on drunken boating. And so when you talk to average, ordinary people, include them in your story, write about the impact of things, you touch people and you cause change. So I would always encourage you, always focus on impact and the ordinary people in your community.
Very good. Thank you. What about just one more comment on, since you were in covered government and politics so much, the state of the state, state of the nation, in brief, of how journalists are vital in communicating what the government does or doesn't do in democracy?
Well, democracies only exist if people are willing to pay taxes or money to support the democracy, and if they're willing to follow the rules of the democracy. For people to be willing to pay taxes and to follow the rules, they have to be educated about what's going on in their democracy. And the news media plays an important role in that. And that's why you always focus on impact. You let people know how something a politician has proposed or something the legislature has passed or something the city council has passed affects them. That is vital to a democracy continuing. If people don't understand what their government is doing and they don't understand where their tax money is going, they're going to quit supporting that democracy. Because ordinary people support the democracy, those ordinary people are as important as any mayor, any governor, or any president. What they think matters. And that's your job as a reporter. One, to report impact and what ordinary people think, and also talk to all the ordinary people in your community. too often we only talk to people who look like us, and that is a huge mistake. You can't make money in the news business if you write off a huge part of your audience. If you got to cover everybody in your community, everybody's got to matter. So I would encourage you to do that.
Well, thank you. Laura, you have any more questions?
I do have more questions, but unfortunately, we're not going to get to them. Wanda and Phil, you have been really gracious today, and I thank you. I'm looking at the chat, and I'm not seeing any questions. If you have a burning question for Wanda or Phil, I would love for you to share it, and then I will ask it on your behalf. Or you could unmute and ask it right now, but I just don't have a way of knowing how many questions there are. And I want to be kind of fair about this. It is 2 minutes until we are supposed to wrap up. I'm happy to stay on here. I'm thinking Phil and Wanda and Nan may be willing to do that as well for just a few more minutes.
There's a question from Lori Call I see in the chat.
Oh, good. You can see it too. Okay. Let's see. Rules for journalism have changed so much with the internet and papers closing down. How does a reporter meet deadlines covering the onslaught of information in today's climate?
I'll start. If you don't mind, I'll start with that. You know, newspapers were online many years ago. We were online in I guess the early 2000s, really. But it has changed a lot now. And I was told in the early 2000s, or whenever we started, that someday online would be bigger than newspapers. Of course, we didn't want to believe it at the time. But guess what? We're there. We are there today, especially with community journalism. You know, there's still big papers like the Washington Post and the New York Times and the Los Angeles Times, and they have pretty good circulation. But they also are very competitive online. So meeting deadlines is even more important today because the deadlines are 24/7. You know, we used to have a single deadline, or if we had 2 or 3 editions a night, we would have 2 or 3 deadlines. Now, deadlines are all the time. And so it's just a matter of learning how to write for the web, learning that you have to sort of string your story along. You have to tell people what's going on different platforms. And as much as we resisted a little bit, those of us who are old school, Phil, I'm not calling it here. We resisted social media. Now really it's all about social media. You know, you can put a story on social media on Twitter or some other platforms and put a little bit at a time if it's a story that's kind of still developing, and then you can rewrite that same story later for whatever platform you need. If it's print, that's fine. If it's another story for the web that you kind of put together and make it better and more cohesive and flow better, and that you can promote as the final story. So the deadlines are crucial, but they're just more of them.
Thank you, Wanda. Oh, I'm sorry, Phil.
To me, having online now is wonderful because when Wanda and I both got in the business, you know, you couldn't put out a paper unless you could afford to pay somebody to print it. You can start an online news site for next to nothing and report the news in your community. And let's say you go to cover the city council in Saraland, and and they're voting on something that's important to the people of Saraland. Maybe whether to allow the construction of a shopping center or something that would bring a Publix to town or something like that, or Kroger or whatever. You can put out on your social media and on your website something as soon as they vote. Then you can put out a longer story, after the meeting's over, quoting what the representative from the grocery store said to the city council, what city council members said. And maybe you can, there are people at the city council meeting from that neighborhood next to the shopping center. You can quote what those average people said to the city council about whether they wanted the shopping center next to them or not. You can do a longer story, so you can put something out instantly. Then you can put something out later that's longer and more in depth. And you have virtually no startup cost. You don't have to build a TV studio and buy a tower. You don't have to buy a printing press. All you've got to do is get social media accounts and a website, and you are in the news business today. So it is a great opportunity that didn't exist when Wanda and I were young.
Well, thank you, Phil. I saw a raised hand. Professor Okeowo from AUM, do you still have a question you want to pose? There we go.
Okay. One thing I want to say is that it is such a great pleasure to see Wanda, who for so many years worked with us when I was at Alabama State. She was an outstanding resource for us. She served on our high school journalism workshop committee. She also served on our advisory council. And this is because I believe that academic programs must connect with the industry if we are going to be successful in actually training students. And she was available, anytime we needed her. We also had a very strong internship program. Students couldn't graduate unless they completed 2 internships. And she was very helpful in that area. I also know Phil too, because he taught with us for about a semester or about a year.
Yes.
Yeah, so I do remember him. I mean, he doesn't look like he's getting older though, but that's another stuff. But I just want to commend, these 2 outstanding giants in our industry. Wanda, I've known her for many years, and I feel also, and I just want to congratulate you, both of you, for all you've done.
Thank you. I will also say that we did take some of your interns, and I'm still in touch with some of them, especially Josh Barker, whom you will remember.
Yes.
He's a good friend still, and it was a pleasure to mentor some of your students.
Thank you.
Nice. Thank y'all so much. There's been a little bit of chat, which you may want to check in on, and I appreciate. I guess we do need to kind of wrap it up, and Nan, do you have anything else to say before I give out the assignment for tomorrow?
No, but please come back tomorrow because we're going to keep rolling.
We are. Let's see. I want to put you on the spot, George Daniels. I was gonna.
Good morning. How are you doing this morning?
George is another faculty member presenter for this. He's also handling the evaluation for us, and we've worked together on Democracy and the Informed Citizen Part 1. So I just wanted you to wave, and then you'll be with us for the remainder. And Professor.
We're going to be asking everybody to take a moment and reflect on today. There are so many great things we've heard this morning. And so you're going to be getting a few questions to answer about what you heard today a little later this afternoon. So look for that in your email.
Thank you very much, George. We will send out some things. Professor Plattenberg is on here as well, or she was earlier. They're scheduled to work with us together on Friday. And so both of you, thank you very much for being here this morning. Okay, I'll stop looking for people and I'll talk about
Laura,
tomorrow.
can I also just say that I put my website on the chat. It's just wandaloy.com. So if anybody wants to reach out to me later, it's there. It's the best way to reach out to me.
And how can they get your book?
My website has all the information.
Thank you, Wanda. You're really gracious to do that. Thanks for putting that in the chat. Okay. So tomorrow, as Philip mentioned, we're going to look at solutions journalism. And we'll have Michael Davis with us. He was not with us this morning, which is fine. He is doing Zoom-based workshops for people all over the world all the time. And that will be our main work together tomorrow. But at the top tomorrow, what I thought we might do is give you the opportunity, if you wish to take it. Nan and George and I thought of questions, and unless we will not have another technical issue tomorrow, y'all, okay? So we're gonna have all of our time, and we wanna ask you, if you wish to share with us tomorrow, to say one good thing that is going on in your community that the world needs to know about. And then another thing that you would like to see improved. And you won't have much time at all, as you can tell. But just give us a taste, a little taste of where you're coming from, and one good thing the world needs to know about where you live, and another thing you would like to see improve. And then another thing I would suggest, I'll do it tomorrow, I think. I had created this cute little backdrop with our logo on it, so maybe I'll use that tomorrow. And if you would like to create a backdrop in Zoom that reflects something about a story that you want to tell or the community you're living in. I know Lisa Chavez had a background that looked like the campus at Alabama A&M, where I know that she works. So I don't see any other backgrounds yet. But if you want to do that, do it. And if you don't want to do it, don't. But that's it for our assignments. Anything I'm forgetting, Nan and George?
No.
Okay.
See everyone tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you to everybody, and especially to Wanda and Phil. Thank you. We'll see y'all tomorrow, and some more people too. We'll get them all on here, okay?